So for a long time now, I've been bringing out guides on Trade Skill Master and how it can help you make a lot of gold. But just recently, I've had a comment from a guildie of mine saying that a lot of my videos don't cover some of the more fundamental aspects of Trade Skill Master that make it so desirable over many of the other add-ons that you could be using in its place. So I thought I'd bring this video out today that talked about setting up various operations beyond auctioning that are going to help you to automate your goal making process. Now, this is the big thing that TSM offers, and quite frankly I'm surprised at myself that I haven't brought this video out earlier, because what TSM really offers you is the ability to automate most of the actions that you want to do so that you can relieve a lot of the time and mental faculties required to make a lot of gold off of more tedious tasks. This is done through operations, and in today's video we're going to be discussing crafting operations, mailing operations and shopping operations. So let's dive in. Now, when it comes to the use of TSM, it basically boils down to three things that happen. There is the creation of groups and the association of items with one another. There is the creations of rules on what you want any given group of items to be able to do. And then there is simply associating the two. Today we're going to be looking at the creation of the operations. I will be alluding to some of the groups that I use and how these operations relate to them, but this video is strictly more pertaining to the actual creation and functionality of the operations themselves. So, first up, crafting. Now when we create a crafting operation, we do so by going onto our operations tab on our TSM menu, going into the crafting section and clicking the little plus. From there, all we need to do is fill out this form of sorts with regards to the rules that we want for what we are going to be crafting. So in this example, you can see that I am using my restock good alchemy stuff example operation that I use, and I'm going to be talking you through each of the options that you see on the page here and what they do. Now, a lot of these are fairly straightforward, so if this seems a little bit redundant to you, then I do apologise, but some of it can be a little bit more intricate than you may imagine. So, first things first, we have our restock quantities, our minimum and maximum restock quantities. Now, this is something that's quite fundamental, but also very useful, and something that you are going to want to be changing quite dramatically depending on what it is that you're crafting. So, this is one of the reasons why we often have many operations, and why you see here that I'm using an alchemy one, and I don't have strictly just a crafting operation for all of my professions. My alchemy tends to craft much higher volume of items than, let's say, my tailoring does, and as a result I'm going to want my maximum restock quantity to be much higher. For these items that I have in this section, which I tend to use this operation on the highly profitable items, I have a maximum restock quantity of 20, you can see that there, and it is going to prove that at any given point, whenever my add-on is told to review how many of an item I have and how many I want to craft, it's never going to go past 20 in terms of the amount that it's going to tell me that I need to craft. Now, similarly, my minimum restock quantity is set to 10. Now, this is essentially that if all of the criteria are met, but I do not have a need for less than 10 of the items to be made, then I simply won't make any items. So let's say, for example, my maximum restock quantity, as you can see is here, is 20, and the group that I have this on includes Elixir of Mongoose. Now, if I already have, let's say, 40 mongoose to sell, and therefore I would only need 6 more to get back up to that 20 restock, that doesn't hit the minimum 10 criteria, and therefore it won't add any crafting of mongoose onto my list of craftable items to be done. Now, of course, these numbers are just what I use for this particular example, and as a result you may want to vary what you use for your profession of choice and whether or not you actually like having a minimum restock quantity. I know a lot of people don't like it. They simply, oh well, I'm missing something from where I want to be, let's craft it. I personally don't like to do that simply because of the fact that I'd spend my entire day crafting. But if you do, then by all means go right ahead. Next on the list is minimum profit. Now, this is an on-off toggle that is essentially saying that you want the operation to consider how much money you're going to make off of the crafting of an item. Personally, I always have this turned on because it's very easy for you to have an operation set up for the crafting of an item that was profitable when you set up the operation and put it onto a certain group, but then over time that has decreased in value or the market has got flooded and you're going to end up crafting items that there's just no point in crafting. So I don't like the idea of crafting an item that's going to get me a net loss. Obviously that's the exact opposite of what we're aiming for, so I tend to have minimum profit enabled. Bear in mind this minimum profit is per item, which a lot of people do get confused by and think it's by the amount of the restock quantity. No, it is per individual item. So here, for example, you can see my minimum profit is set to 20 silver, and I only want to craft items where I'm going to make a minimum of 20 silver craft per pot. Now, obviously, this is the alchemy example. If you are looking to make bigger items that are more costly to manufacture, you may be looking for a healthier profit margin. Now, everything else on this list is either not particularly important or something quite convoluted. Now, when it comes to your price settings, you can override how profit is calculated. TSM has a default crafting sort of price that it assesses for itself, which you can see in the formula underneath the override default craft menu method. There is that box that has the formula in it. If you want to override and change these values, you certainly can. I'm not going to show you how to do that in today's video, simply because of the fact that I don't do it myself. I am capable, I just don't like to. I think TSM has got the great way of doing this by default, and I think that you just open yourself up to more errors if you were to try and change this. If you do want to, then please do by all means experiment and change the crafting formula for determining the prices of things if you think it is appropriate to do so. Beyond that, at the bottom here, all you're going to see is simply just associations for when this operation should and shouldn't be in use. So these are essentially ignore functions. The operation's always going to be in use unless you tell it not to on a particular character or in a particular faction or a particular realm. These menus are how you'd be to put that on. Now, I generally don't use these simply because I only play on one realm, one classic. But on retail, I do have these for my primary server and my sort of secondary server, which isn't quite as established, so I don't have access to the same characters. I do, however, use the same names for my characters on all realms, and that can result in some problems on TSM, and that's why I have these ignore functions in use. Beyond that, the only thing that you're going to see, it's not quite on this screenshot, but scrolling further down is simply just the way that you can associate an operation to a certain group. And all you would do there is you would click on the drop down menu and associate it to the group that you would have already created of items. I'm not going to mention those ignore functions again because they are going to feature on the other operation types that we're discussing in this video. So I'm not going to mention them again for the purposes of saving time. They work exactly the same for any given operation type that we are going to discuss today. So next up, we're going to talk about shopping operations. Now, shopping operations, again, it's just a form that we fill out. And this one is going to share a lot in common with our previous operations, including those bottom sections, like I said, the ignore and apply operation to group sections that we're not going to cover. So the bit that we're really interested in is just these top options here. So first up, we have our maximum auction price per item. So this is essentially the formula that calculates how much you're willing to pay to purchase any given item. Now, I keep this incredibly simple. There are hundreds of ways that you can assess price values and calculate how much you're willing to spend. The only two ways that I ever really see in real use is DB market percentage values, which is my personal favourite, or actual raw gold amounts. Now, raw gold amounts are great if you're purchasing something with a view to vendoring it. So let's say, for example, you know you're going to get 50 silver when you vendor an item that you create using an item you've bought off the auction house. You're not going to want to spend more than 50 silver in order to purchase it, so you could set your price there as, let's say, 25 silver and double your money. Now, personally, I use %DB market values at all times. This is simply because it has an understanding of how much an item typically goes for on my server for every given item, and I want to purchase based off of that market value. So I have it set here to be 70% DB market. Now that means that anytime there is an item on that is in my list of items that I want to purchase and it's on for 70% of its value or lower, it's going to show that item to me for purchase. Now, that's fantastic as far as I'm concerned, because when it comes to the items that I'm looking to purchase in regards to these crafting materials, it gives me two options. It gives me the option to immediately just resell the item for 100% market value when the price rises back to where it should be, which, given that obviously that is the default value, is 100% of DB market, it should do, and it's therefore just easy printing of money that I can just buy something cheap and resell it at its normal price, or potentially higher if I would like to do so. But it also means that I can get crafting materials cheap to craft into an item that I can then sell at market value as well and still make my profit that way. Now, one thing that I would like to mention here is this little box beneath it that you see me have ticked. Now, this is something that you do want to be wary of. This show auctions above max price. I have it engaged here, which is going to mean that any auctions that are more expensive when I'm looking for items are going to display as well, but it will display on the shopping tab that the price of the item in question is higher than what I want to pay. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't normally have this enabled. It was just enabled at the time I took the screenshot because I was looking for some items that I needed right then. I was willing to pay beyond the odds that I normally would. So I enabled this in order to be able to get the materials to craft the item I needed desperately. But generally speaking, I would advise most people to have this disabled. If you want to have it enabled, by all means do. But having it disabled just means you're not going to have any accidents where you spend more on an item than you should. Next up, we have the neat stacks only option, which is simply going to be that the items that display for your purchase is only going to be displayed to you if it is in a multiple of 5. So it's only going to display, let's say for example, a herb, if the herbs have been placed on the auction house in stacks of 5, 10 or 20, I believe, are what it considers to be neat stacks. Now, personally, I couldn't care less, because once I'm buying an item, chances are I'm going to be buying it in neat stacks anyway, and even if not, if the item's cheap, I don't mind clicking my mouse a few extra times to get those items into my mailbox for less price than if I was to spend a little bit more to get those neat stacks. So, I don't like having that on. If you are someone who's bothered by it and you don't like opening up 50 auctions of one herb at a time, by all means enable it. That's entirely up to you. Next up, we have maximum restock quantity. So this is similar to our crafting operations again in terms of how many items we want to be able to purchase. So like you can see here, I have my maximum restock quantity set to 0. So essentially I'm not using this function. But let's say you don't want to end up sitting up on 300 of an item that you're not sure about whether it's going to go up in value or not when the new phase hits. You can put this at, let's say, 50, and you're only risking a certain amount of gold there investing in that many items to be able to sell. So at the time of recording, we're fast approaching phase 5, and I actually had someone asking me the other day if I had any of the sandworm meat that is going to be needed more in phase 5 than it is right now. Now, I didn't have it for them at the time, but I do have plenty now because I looked it up and realised that it is something that is going to go up in price. But this is exactly the type of thing where maybe when phase 5 hits, everyone's already got what they need and the price isn't going to go that high, or maybe there's been an influx of people that have already stocked up on it, and it's a gamble on my part in terms of making the gold. I may want to put a maximum restock quantity on the items that I'm purchasing for phase 5 release, and therefore not risk going beyond what I'm definitely going to be able to sell with those items when the patch hits. Now, the final one here is sources to include for restock. Now, this is essentially going to mean that it's going to look at whether you have items in your bags, banks, alts, and whether it's going to factor those in or not with regards to whether you need to purchase another item. If you're not using your maximum restock quantity, it's not particularly pertinent, but it is something that you may want to look at if you don't want to end up buying 200 of an item that you think you need, only to find out that you have an awful lot of them already sitting in your bank. And now the final operation I want to discuss is mailing. Now, this is honestly the best function in Trade Skill Master in my opinion. I absolutely adore it, and it is as simple as setting up automatic mailing of certain items to certain characters. Now, as you can see on the side here, I have a character called Selling Llama. That is my auction house character. It is the one that is my bank and stores all of the materials on, and I basically want everything to be sent to him all of the time. Now, for the most part, this seems like it's not going to be that big of a deal, But let's say you're leveling up a new alt and you're filling your bags with loads of low level crafting materials, and you're going back to hand in all your quests, and you just want to get rid of all these items out of your bag that you filled up and just get back going questing again. All you need to do is go to a mailbox, click on the group section, click send, and it does the rest. Everything goes where it needs to go. That is absolutely fantastic and invaluable as a time save, and I love it. But enough about my digressions there on my favourite aspects of TSM. How does it work? So it's as simple as once you've created your operation and named it as you want, you simply need to type in the name of the character that you want the items to be sent to. So for here, this is my selling llama one. I have his name in the target character, and beyond that, everything else is pretty much left as default. But I will talk you through all of the rest of it as well, which is essentially in regards to whether or not you want to keep some items on the character you're on, or if you want to send them to elsewhere. So keep this amount is pretty self-explanatory. It is an amount of items that you want to keep on any given character that you are sending from. So let's say, for example, you're sending light leathers, and you want to keep 10 on you at all times on the character that you are on. It will only send any amount beyond 10 to the target character. If you don't have an amount beyond that amount, it won't send any. Again, set maximum quantity works a bit similar. It'll only send a certain amount. So let's say you only ever want to send 10 light leathers to be sold. If you set a maximum quantity and enable that tick box there, and you set the maximum quantity to 10, it's never going to send more than 10 of that item to the character in question. Now, restock target to max quantity works quite similarly, but instead of looking at how many items are in the bag on the character that you're on and never sending more than, let's say, 10, the restock target to max quantity looks at how many are already on the character that you're sending to. So let's say, for example, your character that you're sending to already has 5. It's not going to send more than 5 if you set that limit to 10. Now, again, everything below that point is just going to be things that we've already mentioned with regards to ignoring operations and applying the operation to groups. So while it is quite simple to set up, this is honestly one of the most invaluable aspects to Trade Skill Master, and something I highly recommend that you set up for yourself. Now that's going to about wrap it up for this one, guys. I do hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do let me know down below, and even if you didn't, let me know that too, and let me know how I can improve things for you going forward. This was a fairly general overview. It does primarily look at understanding what you're looking at more than anything. So if that isn't the style for these videos that you prefer, please do let me know that. And I am looking currently at setting up a video that is an entire Trade Skill Master start to finish comprehensive guide. Let me know down below if that's something you'd be interested in too. But for now, guys, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Later.